Thank you for downloading show number 305 of the Art Junkies Podcast.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the show. I've wanted to have today's guest on for a while now. Fall protection was a topic that I've had on my list for quite some time. Today's guest is Andrea Martin. Andrea is a fall protection specialist with 3M. She was also featured in the 3M documentary entitled Skilled that premiered at last year's Sundance Film Festival. You can check out her story and many others since the video is now available on YouTube. I'll go ahead and put the link in the show notes so you can access it anytime. On a side note, the last episode of the Art Junkies Podcast for the 2023 year will be out on Tuesday the 26th since Christmas is on Monday the 25th. I'd like to close out the year with an Ask Me Anything episode. It's exactly what it sounds like. I'd like to get you all to participate in this episode by submitting questions to me, and I'll answer them on the podcast next week. You can submit your questions to my DM on Instagram at ArtJunkiesPodcast, or you can shoot me an email, show@artjunkies.com. Both methods of contact are in the show notes as well. I'll try to answer as many questions as possible. Try to get the questions in as soon as you can because I'm going to be recording the episode late next week. All right, before we get into today's episode, I got a couple words from the folks who help keep this ship afloat.
At Rockmount, when we talk welding, we talk about maintenance welders. Maintenance welders aren't the ones working in clean, climate-controlled factories. They're that special breed of welder working out in the field, supporting industries like farming, construction, mining, processing, and manufacturing, as well as city, county, and state maintenance shops. We're talking about maintaining the strength and longevity of hard-working equipment in tough and unpredictable conditions. But equipment breaks, and downtime is expensive, so that's where we come in. We don't believe in short-term solutions. From our arc rods and wires to thermal cutting, hard facing, and brazing, our products are designed to reduce re-welds and keep your equipment running. Our team knows what it's like to weld something the right way. If you're looking for a high-quality, long-lasting repair, you've come to the right place. So if you want to save money in the long run, reduce downtime, and keep your equipment working as hard as you do, let us know. At Rockmount, we make products designed to weld stronger and last longer. Because we believe that if something isn't fixed correctly, it's not really fixed at all. And if there's one thing we value above the rest, it's getting the toughest jobs done right.
Today's episode of the Art Junkies Podcast is brought to you by Outlaw Leather, the OGs of custom welding hoods. I've got several Outlaw Leather hoods, and I bought them long before they were a sponsor of the show. Having them support my work is just an added bonus, obviously. But this is a product I've used and I've trusted and I believe in. The folks at Outlaw Leather do an amazing job at what they do. Each piece that Outlaw makes is designed, stained, painted, and assembled by hand in Pasadena, Texas. Outlaw doesn't just make hoods, though. They specialize in custom leather pieces that are designed to stand up to the rigors of the work that we do. Whether it's on the pipeline, ironwork, mobile welding, shop welding, or any other facet of our industry, you can put your faith in Outlaw's gear. From hoods to bolt bags, scabbards, rod pouches, arm pads, and more, Outlaw's got you covered. I just had them create 10 custom pieces that I'm going to be giving out as presents this year, and I couldn't be happier with the final product and quality of each piece. If you want to order directly from their website, just visit outlawleather.com and use Art Junkies and you can save 15% off all in-stock leather goods. Or if you're looking for a custom piece, just shoot them an email, info@outlawleatherllc.com, and they'll bring your idea to life. We're also brought to you by Underground Metalworks. Are you ready to dive into the world of welding or take your skills to new heights? Look no further than Underground Metalworks, your ultimate destination for welding excellence in sunny Orlando, Florida. Underground Metalworks offers a range of exciting opportunities to ignite your welding journey. Whether you're a novice or a seasoned pro, we've got something for you. Our week-long comprehensive classes cover stick, MIG, and TIG welding, ensuring you'll receive top-notch training. And if you're short on time, check out our weekend MIG or weekend TIG welding classes. Or you can explore the convenience of our evening classes. Plus, we've made sure all of our classes are affordable and scheduled for your convenience. Already a skilled welder? Need certification or assistance with WPS development? We've got your back. Underground Metalworks is your go-to destination for all things welding related. Ready to take that first step or elevate your welding game? Visit underground-metalworks.com to learn more and secure your spot. But you gotta hurry. 2024 spots are filling up fast. Don't miss out on the welding adventure of a lifetime with Underground Metalworks. All right, you know what time it is. Fire up your machines, drop your hood, and turn me up 5.
You're listening to the ARC Junkies Podcast, helping you make every weld better than your last with each episode. And now your host, Jason Becker.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining me now is Andrea Martin, all the way from Canada. Andrea is a fall protection specialist, and I've been trying to track her down for about a year now because 3M released a documentary called Skilled, in which I had the young man Cedric on the podcast about 8 months ago. But I've been wanting to talk to somebody about fall protection because fall protection is something near and dear to my heart. I've got a background as a structural steel iron worker, and that was something that an essential piece of safety equipment that I was never trained on properly how to use. Right when I got into construction, it was like 2005, I got in the Marines, and I started working for this company. They did structural steel iron work, and we pretty much just wore the harness as a check in the box. We never tied off to anything just because we wanted to look good from the road so OSHA never stopped by. And that's the mentality that I want to break that mentality. I want to change that mentality and get people to understand this stuff is here to make your job easier and better and make your life safer so that you can go home every day back to your loved ones. So, Andrea, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and coming on the podcast. How did you get into fall protection?
Oh, I love fall protection. So it's funny because when I started in sales, I started in glove manufacturing to start off with, and then I got moved into distribution. And to set myself as a female apart in the sales world, it's like, what do you find that's unique or something that brings value that's going to make you stand out? And so I took a whole bunch of courses and I landed on fall protection. And I was like, this is cool. I'm a puzzle person. It's a solution-based sort of situation. And I just kind of gravitated to it, just as some people would gravitate to respiratory. That's what they like. That the fall protection component is an ever-evolving piece where every day is different based on the application, what somebody's doing. So I loved it because then that was kind of my niche as to who I was going in and building relationships where I was going up against people that had relationships for 15, 20 years. So how do you nudge your way into that back door, the front door of that account to show them what you can bring to them? And from there, I just kind of took it and ran with it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool how you're passionate about fall protection, but I could see how that would happen because once I joined the union and I was properly trained in fall protection. We had to get subpart R training and stuff like that, Kennedy Space Center training, like all these different types of training that we had to do for the iron workers. I was like, man, this stuff's not really as cumbersome and a pain in the butt as everybody thinks it is. I was just given cheap harnesses and no training. These things are actually pretty functional. And like you said, it's problem based, or, like you're solution oriented, so you're trying to figure out, because not every day is the same. Are we setting up rat lines? Are we clamping on with beam clamps, nail plates? I mean, there's special concrete fasteners. There's all kinds of different ways to tie off so that it's not cumbersome. It's not an inconvenience. So
that's it.
I'd like to talk to you about just harness selection. And for the folks out there that are doing this stuff on a day-to-day basis, they don't have the proper training. This is kind of one way to get them on the right track, because I know they're not going home watching fall protection videos on YouTube once they get back, and they're not receiving this type of training at work for the most part. So how do we identify a good harness? How do we pick a good harness? And then let's talk about proper fit and proper use and inspection of the harness.
Absolutely. And I look at it as when you bought steel toe boots, did you buy the cheapest steel toe boots that were out there on the market? Or because you were wearing them every single day, you invested in good shoes for your feet, for comfort, etc. So I take the same approach with a harness. If you are going to be wearing it every single day, one, it has to be the right harness for the application. There's numerous D-ring configurations. If you're in a work positioning application, we have to have work positioning D-rings. Every harness comes with a back D-ring for fall arrest. We have front D-rings for ladder climbing or descent. We're going to go down into a confined space, and shoulder D-rings, and so on. So one is choosing the correct harness for the application. The second one is choosing the right size. I probably spent 99% of my time on a site teaching people how to readjust a harness. It's a 5-point harness for a reason. It has 5 points of adjustment. Adjust them all. The leg straps can't be down around your knees, so on and so forth. So a harness that's too big, a worker has the potential to slip out of it completely in the event of a fall. The shoulder straps will separate, but a harness that's too small can also cause issues because the subpelvic strap isn't sitting below the base of their seat. The subpelvic strap in your butt will meet in the event of a fall. So that's where the dynamic forces go. If those components aren't working, it has to be a well-oiled machine. If they are not working and they're in the right places, then in the event of a fall, we're going to have dynamic forces in places that we don't want to have dynamic forces. You know, the groin area is the main area. Let's just not sugarcoat it.
Horrific stories about that.
Yeah, it's not pretty, right? And when we're talking dynamic forces, we're talking potentially 600, 900, 1,300 pounds of force to the body, right? The maximum arresting force on the human body is about 1,800 pounds of force within our legislation. So that is a crucial component, is proper fit. It has to fit you. There's not a one size fits all. Yes, there's universal quote unquote harnesses that'll fit the majority of the workers that are out there in a sizing configuration. But if you get somebody like myself who's 5'8" and 100 and some odd pounds, I fit actually into a small harness, or I'd fit into a medium in the wintertime when I've got a big jacket on. You know, if I need some more room for adjustment. So ensuring that the person is properly fit and comfort. When you look at all the different harnesses that are available out there on the market, do you want padding? Do you want maybe the padding to be removable in the winter time, in the summertime because it's too hot? Do you want to have easy adjustments? Then there's crazy harnesses out there, which are amazing. And they actually have like a bar that goes from the D-ring to the waist belt. So 3M had this, and essentially what it does is it removes a majority of the weight off of your shoulders and pushes it down into your hips. So it's like carrying a hiker's backpack, essentially. So when we're carrying all that weight as an iron worker all day long, it's nicer to have it in the shoulder, in the hips, not on the shoulders where the fatigue is. So Again, looking at the application and the job, if somebody's going to put it on the back of their door and maybe pull it out once a year, you know, we don't have to have all the bells and whistles to make sure it fits.
Yeah, I had when I left doing iron work, I think the last belt that I had was a 5-point tower harness, and I had the tool belt integrated into it and all that stuff, so it could hold all of my gear. Because I mean, like essentially, you're always wearing your harness. Everything that we did, anytime you get above 6 feet, you have to wear a harness. And so a lot of the applications that I purchased it for, I was above 6 feet, so I had to wear a harness. And comfort is key. I remember one of the companies I worked for, they safety is mandatory. You had to have a harness, and it was like part of the requirements, OSHA, yada yada yada. So they would meet the bare minimum requirements. So they go down to the safety shack or the safety tool store or whatever, and they had, it's called compliance in a bucket. And so you've probably seen these. It's a harness with a lanyard and a 5-gallon bucket, and you just buy however many you need for how many people, and it's one size fits most. But there's so many different adjustments on there, and it's just junk. It's not comfortable. I ended up buying, the little pads for your seatbelts, the little puffy Velcro pads or whatever. I would put those on there just so it would quit digging into my neck, because it wasn't, it was a cheap harness. It wasn't built for comfort. It was just built for compliance. Safety person shows up, you're in compliance, good. The company has done their job making a work safe environment for you to perform your work. And yeah, it's just horrible. So I ended up spending a lot of money, of my own money, to buy a comfortable harness that fit and did the job. It wasn't just compliant, but it worked. It was functional. It was comfortable. It's something you're going to wear this thing for 8, 10, 12 hours out of the day. If it's digging in all your little parts and it doesn't stay fastened, and it doesn't stay fit exactly where you wanted it to be, it's kind of it's pain, So then that's where people are like, oh, this stuff, I don't want to wear it. It's more cumbersome. It's more of an inconvenience than it's doing anything. I'd rather just not wear one at all.
Absolutely. And that's the biggest thing is when we take compliance, we can actually in the past have shown customers that taking a step up to a better harness, they're like, our guys will never take care of them. I'm like, they're throwing these ones out because they're cheap and they don't care about them. But if we implement a program and take them a step up into a harness that's going to be more comfortable, you're going to get better safety compliance on your site. So coming in at the bare minimum is actually creating more safety hazards than it is. And then that's one less thing that a safety person has to worry about with the Ministry of Labor or OSHA or, whatever country you're living in. One less thing that we have to worry about because those folks are going to wear it because they're like, hey, this is a great harness. They invested in us. We're, especially nowadays with the lack of skilled trades, is invest in the people, they'll stay. Right. And safety is a good investment. That's a huge investment. So, and then those compliance in a bucket drive me bonkers, always have, because
Right.
so you're an iron worker and you're standing on top of a structural I-beam. You take a compliance in a bucket that comes with a regular 6-foot lanyard. That 6-foot lanyard cannot be subjected to a greater than 6-foot free fall, meaning that your anchor point with that lanyard can't be any lower than your back D-ring. So when you anchor it to an I-beam, you're subjecting it to a 12-foot free fall, which means it's potentially going to blow out the entire energy absorber. But then on top of that, that structural beam is a sharp edge. So the second that lanyard comes in contact with that sharp edge, it's going to have a failure.
Yeah, it's a 90-degree angle. It's going to cut it.
It's a sharp. It's just going to cut like a hot knife through butter, right? And so having this conversation on the leading edge and sharp edge component and the ANSI standard for SRLs kind of came more in line with the Canadian standard that took effect in 2019. That leading edge component is as soon as we're anchoring below that back D-ring, like we're subjecting a product, if it's not leading edge, we're subjecting it to beyond its capabilities and potentially that sharp edge, so concrete and structural steel.
Yeah, and I want to say probably 90% of the times that I had to tie off, it was to like a beamer or something like that, right there on the I-beam. So it, like you said, a 12-foot fall. So that's something even I didn't know. They might have mentioned it during the safety class that I took way back in 2010 or something to that effect. But yeah, I want to say the majority of the tie-offs that we did was, right by our feet. And that's why it was always kind of a pain in the butt because you're tripping over it, you're dragging it across, the decking or this, that, and everything. We did a couple jobs where we'd have to run a rat line. And so you run it, from one side of the building to the next, you tie off and you can have X amount of employees on that, piece. But again, it's dragging on the deck. And then we finally, the company that I was working for, we actually started putting, like 4-foot uprights onto, with weld-on rings and everything like that, and actually bolting them to the eaves of the building so that we could tie off, and it wasn't as cumbersome. I mean, we had longer leads and everything like that, but it was more for, I guess, fall arrest instead of, it'd be fall restraint versus fall arrest, because it would prevent you from falling off the building. So it wasn't ever meant for impact, because we used like the yo-yos and stuff like that. But if you slipped or whatever, it would lock up, and then you pretty much stay where you're at. Yeah, absolutely. And in today's technology, like there's so many amazing things. And I've worked very closely with the unions, especially the iron workers on the Canadian side here in Ontario, is showing them that, these beam stanchions that essentially clamp onto the structural I-beam, and you can run horizontal along them, and you can have numerous workers, depending on the section, you can have numerous workers along it. And at first they think it's cumbersome, but once they actually start using it in a job, they're like, this is great. Yeah.
Like so much better than one of those beam buddies, like a gliding I-beam that's following behind you. And sometimes it kind of chunks up a little bit on the beam.
It doesn't exactly glide straight. Yeah. It lock you up and then kind of throw you off your step, which could cause a fall in itself.
Exactly. So it creates another hazard, right? But this is the implementation of, yes, there's the cost to it, but that cost, this is a product that's going to last you a very long time, but that cost versus the cost of a worker potentially tripping, getting jammed up and falling. And then we got to implement a rescue plan and everything like that. In the long run, saves you a lot of money. That's, the worker first on the safety side. We're working through the hierarchies of the fall protection world. But as an iron worker, there's not a lot of overhead I-beams that you can clamp onto. when you're implementing these, right? You're not working at, like, say, Amazon, where they're on an order picker. The SRL's right here. They hook up to their back D-ring. Off they go. They go up several layers and pull out, whatever it is that you ordered on Amazon for Prime, and then whip around. Just like when we're looking at construction, it's an ever evolving, changing scenario where we have to kind of take a step back and go, now what do we do?
Yeah, it's almost like an engineered fall protection plan nowadays, which is cool. We use this one product, I think it was sky webbing. So you have to go up there and you got like this special sled, and there's like a bag, and it kind of looks like spider web. You kind of pull it out the back, and then you clip, these little D-rings along, and then you pull this sled across the bar joist. And the sled was long enough to where it would span, several bar joists at a time, so it would never fall down. But you pull that thing out and you start stretching all this sky webbing out, and that would actually allow you to walk like the I-beams or the purlins or the bar joists and stuff like that without having to be tied off. Because, surprise, as you're putting the building up, there's nothing to tie off to, And so, I mean, if you don't have anything to tie off to, it's like, okay, I'm wearing the harness just so I look like I'm being compliant. Now, meanwhile, my lanyard's getting caught on everything. Like, what can we do here? So developing a good safety plan, like we said, the environment changes all the time from one job site to the next, and sometimes day to day, because you might be up here, putting up, whatever you're working on, and then you finish that task up, and then another trade comes in behind you and covers everything up. Well, there goes your fall protection plan. So now you got to come up with something new. So it's ever changing, depending on where you're at and what you're doing in every single job. I thought it was kind of interesting that still, as of today, 2023, falls are still the number one cause of death on construction, which blows my mind because that was the same case back in 2010. So, in the past 13 years, fall is still number one.
Yeah. And there's a lot of reasons for it, right? So new and young workers is a huge one, right? We're getting people in. Our shortage of skilled trades is causing us to rush things through. So we take an 8-hour course. So here in Ontario, in the construction regs, every construction worker is mandated to take an 8-hour fall arrest course under the construction regs. It's laid out. But what it doesn't do is doesn't go into all the nitty gritty of the leading edge and really how the product works and all these other things. It's an overview of the hierarchies. Can you put out netting, guarding, restrain, restrict, fall arrest, and then rescue? But it's not until we get out onto a construction site, we take the product that they have and say, this is how it works. And this is how it's going to help you in the event of a fall, right? Everybody thinks that, SRLs are always leaning into an SRL and just explaining to them that it doesn't work like that. You can't lean into it. There's a reserve lifeline on there. It's a fall arrest only system. Like that's how it is. But with the ever evolving things, it's just sometimes thinking outside the box. So when I've worked with ironworkers, I'm like, take these stanchions, these horizontal stanchions, clamp them onto the beam. And when you're lifting the beam, your fall arrest program and plan is up there.
Yeah, it goes with you.
It's going with you. We don't have to worry about setting it up 60 feet up in the air, right? We're going to set it up on the ground. And we've been working on some large projects like near the large Gordie Howe Bridge that's going on in Windsor and Detroit. That's a pretty cool project. And we worked with them as they were putting in all of these pieces of the bridge. And they're like, what do we do? We're like, boom, put these on. They've got the horizontal systems and the guys love them. Mm-hmm. It's just at first it seems cumbersome, but the fall fatalities have not decreased. So we've got, when we look at it, engineering and product development has increased. Regulations and rules between ANSI and CSA and OSHA have increased. But what hasn't decreased is those falls from heights. And I think a lot of it comes down to the cost of fall arrest, the compliance. Here's your compliance and can, off you go. But realizing too that gravity's constant regardless of where you go. So you can put on your harness, you can have your lanyard dragging behind you, but if it's not connected to anything, it's really useless to you. Yeah.
So now let's talk. So we talked a little bit about fit up and sizing and everything. What are some of the things that we need to inspect when we pick up our harness, and how often should we inspect that harness?
Yeah, it's a great question. So right out of the bag, a harness needs to be inspected by the user. So the user is responsibility by every manufacturer, their fall protection is to inspect it before every use, not once a week. If you take it off twice a day, you should be inspecting it twice a day. Every time you go to put it on, you really should be doing a thorough inspection. So you're making sure, one, that the labels are intact. If those labels are missing, it's toast. Don't go any further. It's done. Because those labels have pertinent information. So the data manufacturing, the lot number it came from. So if there's any recalls or product inspections, all that information is right there. And then from there, I work my way, I grab the back C-ring. I'm looking for corrosion, rust, pitting, any deformities within the metal components. You're looking for cuts, tears, rips, abrasion within the harness webbing itself, ensuring that everything's intact. There's no grommets that are wonky. And so as you're going through it, and all those user manuals, we kind of call them IFUs, instructions for use. We've also called them MOM because it's an easy way to remember that acronym. MOM is Manufacturer's Operating Manual because mom's always right. Mm-hmm. So always refer back to the MOM, right? But those are the main components. And so when we talk to people, we're like, are you inspecting your harness? Yeah, I inspect it every day. I'm like, so when did this giant burn hole get in here? And they kind of stumble through it. So yeah, companies have the check marks and people do it just like they all do. Check. Everything's great. So those pre-use inspections are to be done by the worker, and then at least at the bare minimum annually by a competent person other than the worker. So whether that's an outside person or somebody within the company that is trained, 3M offers like a 3-hour or 4-hour inspection course. So they're trained, they know what to look for, they can read a user manual, we qualify them, and then they're deemed competent by the company. So that has to be done. But if it's a nasty environment, you should probably be doing it every 3 months or every 6 months. But the worker's responsibility is still that pre-use inspection.
Okay. And then what is it on the threads? I remember something distinctly about the threads. Like if there's 3 threads consecutively missing, that harness needs to be disposed of?
Yeah, so it just depends on the manufacturer as to like broken threads. So some will say 1. Again, this is where it's not always consistent across manufacturers.
Okay.
So some will say 1 broken thread, it's done. Like as soon as it's broken. There's the back stitching where we start and stop the stitching, but then the broken thread. Or if there's abrasion along the side of the webbing, that happens because it's rubbing up against your clothing. But if it exceeds or goes in beyond 1/8 of an inch, and sometimes there's dotted lines along it, so you can kind of tell, or burn holes greater than 1/8 of an inch. So that goes back to proper selection of harnesses. If you're a welder or you're grinding, wearing a regular nylon web harness, probably not the best thing to be wearing. You could be wearing like a welding harness that's like an 8 cal Kevlar Nomex blended, because the second you get one hole in that harness, it's done.
They make those now? They make like a harness designed for welders? Because I want to say that's what I was looking for, because that was my primarily function when I was out in the field and I had to wear fall protection. Welding was always like the bane of my existence when it comes to my fall protection gear, because a lot of the stuff I'm doing is overhead, so that all falls down on me. And I would always have so they make harnesses for welders now?
Yeah, absolutely. They've been around
awesome.
for years. Yeah.
Okay.
So and that's again where we look at, I can take a bunch of harnesses and look at them and go, okay, so who's welding? Mm. Well, how can you tell? Like, well, there's a gazillion welding holes in this harness, right? There's welding spatter everywhere.
There's BBs burnt into the threads.
Yeah, I'm like, either you've got a messy welder or, we're doing the overhead where it's coming down on it. Mm-hmm. So that's where looking at the proper selection. If you're in utilities, you're not going to, and you're dealing with live power, you're not going to wear an 8 cal welding harness. You're going to wear a 40 cal arc flash harness specifically, and making sure that your lanyard, your SRL is arc flash rated too, because there's a blast and an arc that comes through. The last thing you want is that harness, melting to you. But if the lanyard isn't arc rated, it can burn and you're flying out of a bucket if you're working out of a bucket truck.
Yeah.
So it's knowing the application, and the application is so crucial to picking the actual fall protection gear that you're going to use.
Yeah. I used to get yelled at all the time because I worked while I was with the iron workers, I worked at some theme parks down here in Central Florida. And so you get a different safety person every job. And I would always get yelled at because they're like, where's your harness? And well, so what I used to do is I would put my harness on, fit it up correctly and everything. And because I had the nylon webbing and all that, I would just take one of the bright orange welding jackets that we all had to wear. And I would just cut like a 4-inch slit right in the back. And so I'd put my harness on, and then I'd throw my welding jacket over top of it so I'm not burning up my harness. And then I would just clip the D-ring in through the jacket and just run it that way. So they could never see the harness. They always just seen this bright orange jacket with nothing across the top. And I was like, hey, look, like, you want me to burn the harness up? You want to buy me a new one every day, or you want me to take care of this one and throw a jacket over it? So, like, I can assure you, I mean, there's a big lanyard sticking out of the back of it. I'm wearing my fall protection. I'm just trying not to burn it up.
Yeah, exactly. And we see that a lot too. It's like, hey, if you're not going to invest in this, or if somebody's just welding once in a blue moon, but they want something that's a little bit more comfortable. Okay, well, here's your welding jacket. Put it on over top when you're doing the work, right? Mm-hmm. And there's so many different inventions, even within the clothing line, that work very closely with fall protection too.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Now, like we're starting to see more D-ring splits and things.
Okay. I should have patented that back in the day. Now, the harnesses, do they have an expiration date?
It depends on the manufacturer. So every major manufacturer will say, no, it's not based on the age, it's about the condition.
Okay.
Because it's kind of a false sense of security. Here's your 5-year expiry. Guy goes out, he welds in it. He gets welding spatter on it day one. He's like, good for 5 years. We're good. Mm-hmm. We're good, guys. And off they go. So it's about the condition and not the age. Now, some companies will implement on an end user level, whether they're going to put in a 5-year. And I always say, you got to figure it out if you're going to do it from the date of manufacturing, or you're going to do it from the date you actually implement that product into the field.
Okay.
So, yeah, because really it's that false sense of security that I'm good, I don't need anything. And then 5 years later, you're pulling whatever's left of a harness out of a tool bag because they're like, well, it's due now. I'm trading it in.
Right. Now, in addition to the harness, now that we've talked about like harness selection and fit up and inspection and stuff like that, there's a lot of stuff we can attach to our D-rings, whether it's the yo-yos or the 6-foot lanyard or the dual lanyards. Let's talk about some of that, as well as like, how we want to inspect those. Like what are some of the different variations available? So like I said, if people don't have formal training, I mean, at least this will put them on the right path.
Absolutely. So we've got lanyards, and then we have self-retracting lifelines. So lanyards have the energy absorber on them. That would go directly to the back D-ring and will either come in a single leg or a twin leg. So, or as some people will say, a dual leg or 100% tie off. It all means the same thing. It's one or two. So one energy absorber to 2 legs. You'll never connect 2 systems to the back D-ring. So again, you're making sure that you're inspecting the snap hooks and the rebar hooks that are on there, that they're closing properly, that they're not damaged. You're inspecting all the webbing, the energy absorber. Nobody's cut open the casing. It's not damaged, it's not partially deployed. You'll be able to tell a deployment because they kind of spring out. There's about 4 feet of energy absorber in there, so you'll be able to tell that. But versus SRLs are slightly different. So again, single leg and twin leg, they tend to connect underneath the webbing of the D-ring, so it leaves the D-ring free. And we're looking at the housing, making sure that they're not damaged, dented, that there's no rivets missing, right? All those components are there. We're checking those snap hooks again. I always say, you always give it the free try, because the first time it might have opened and closed on you totally fine, but the second and third time might have been hesitation, because on a construction site, we've got dust blowing, we've got rocks and, small particulates that can end up in the snap hook, get right in there in the spring and just kind of bung up a little bit, right? If it does happen, what we'd say is just take some, the dusting spray that you would use to clean out your keyboard, and spray that into there. No shop air, no high pressure air whatsoever. You're going to damage the gear, but just kind of spray it in there. And then sometimes some dry graphite. If it's really kind of bunging up, a little bit of dry graphite right into there, making sure it doesn't get onto the web, just to try it out. And if all else fails, if it doesn't work anymore, we toss it out.
Okay.
The same thing goes with the SRL, is that you could have a 6-foot, 8-foot, 20-foot SRL. what you're going to do is you're going to pull out all the cable, making sure that there's no bird caging or kinking that could have happened on the cable. And then as you start to release the cable back into the housing, every so often, you're going to pull on the cable and make sure that it's locking up. So when we're pulling on that cable, we're making sure that the brake, the clutch, the pawl, everything that's inside that system is engaging, because that's a crucial component, right? We have seen fatalities where they haven't done their pre-use inspection on large SRLs. They've left them out in the wintertime. And then that large SRL, when the guy goes to put it on his back, it's functioning, it's working. But when he fell, the insides of the system were frozen. So the clutch, the pawl, the spring, nothing had the ability to work. So that would have been prevented by doing our pre-use inspection. And I don't like to say the term workplace accidents, because I believe that everything had the capability of being prevented, right? So whether we didn't tie off, or we didn't do a pre-use inspection, or we didn't have the right gear for the application and the job at hand. So those are the crucial components, because in the world of construction, anything can happen.
Oh yeah.
Right. It's ever changing. So leave it in your car in the wintertime. Welcome to Canada. It's cold. It gets a little toasty here. And so if it's in contact with the snow and the rain during the day, and then I put it in the truck overnight and it freezes overnight, well, is it defrosted by the time we go to use it? Has it damaged anything from the freezing and the exposure to the climate?
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. This segment of the Arc Junkies podcast is brought to you by Everlast Welders. After several years of research, customer input, and technological design work, Everlast has developed and released the new top-tier Typhoon class of TIG and stick welders. Designed to compete head-to-head in the next generation of elite AC and DC TIG and stick welding machines, the Typhoon 230 offers the best combinations of features and specifications for true next-level performance. It runs off 110 and 230 volt. It features AC and DC TIG welding capabilities. It has 5 AC waveforms to choose from, including the all-new industry-first trapezoid. Check out all the great features at everlastwelders.com, and be sure to use Arc Junkies in the comment section at checkout to get that free Nova foot pedal and TIG torch when you buy any machine that comes with a stock foot pedal. Everlast Welders. Weld mean, weld green. We're also brought to you by Strong Hand Tools. Educators, are you looking for quality fabrication tools at an affordable price? Don't answer that question. I already know what you're going to say. Head on over to stronghandtools.com/ArcJunkies and check out the Educators Discount Program. Stronghand's going to send you some free tools just for signing up. Students need to learn the fundamentals of fabrication if they're going to be able to compete in the job market after graduation. You got to get the fabrication tools in their hands while they're in school, because the first day on the job shouldn't be the first time they get to use fixturing tools. Check out stronghandtools.com/ArcJunkies and get your program on the fast track to fabrication. Now let's get back to the show. And then some of those hooks, I think they're preventable now, but they used to be able to roll out. So I guess there was like there's certain diameters that you want to make sure for certain D-rings that you're utilizing, because they can actually unlock themselves if it gets kind of twisted around, and they can pop right out.
Yeah, so that's why you'll see every hook has a dual like a dual opening.
Latch.
Yeah. So, and then self-closing is that back in the day, the carabiners you use for your keys, just slap it on to it locks, right? Back in the day when we didn't have that, if it twisted and turned, it was easy to put pressure on that gate and it would just open. So now with the dual lock component, of course, we want to make sure that the hook and the back D-ring, we don't get that false connection where you think that it's hooked up, because it can go right through. So again, compatibility of manufacturers is the crucial component too. Sticking with one manufacturer across the board as much as possible, it just, again, takes away that one component of misuse. So it's like, hey, we're going to stick with XYZ manufacturer, because if anything happens, we can take this back to the manufacturer and be like, what is going on? This is our system. Or if there was a failure, where was the failure? Was it on the anchor from one manufacturer? Was it on the SRL of another manufacturer? Was it on the harness of another manufacturer? There's a lot of finger pointing. We can just take that and say,
gotcha. So most companies that manufacture harnesses, they pretty much run the full line of like anchor points and lanyards and SRLs and hooks and all that stuff?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, just depends on the application. So if you want to get into horizontal systems, it's going to decrease the number of manufacturers that you might be compatible with. But yeah, the majority of them will always have the harnesses, the lanyards, the SRLs. I'm not a big fan of lanyards only because of the misuse of lanyards. It's probably the most misused piece of gear out there on the market. Mm-hmm. Is it going to go anywhere? No, because two things. One, they're light, and two, they're inexpensive. But the cool thing is when we're talking like leading edge, so for an iron worker, if you don't want to have the weight of an SRL on your back, there's leading edge lanyards. You get 6 foot, but now you still have that slack in the lanyard versus the SRL that gives you that capability of the retracting in and out like your seatbelt.
Yeah. That was the worst part of like doing it become the day that we're doing decking and we got all our safety gear out and everything. And you got your self-retracted lifeline hooked up to the rat line and all that good stuff. And you go to move with a sense of purpose, and all of a sudden you lock up and get pulled backwards. And I used to hate that so much. That was a pain in the butt. But also, it's like constant tension, with that retracted lifeline because it's got positive pressure, positive pull the whole time. So no matter how much you adjusted your harness, because you've got this thing pulling on you, it's always working a little bit of slack out. So you're constantly adjusting your harness and your setup. But also, aren't there some of the self-retracting lifelines that are only meant to be used vertically, only meant to be used horizontally, or they have some that are dual use? You can use them in a vertical or horizontal configuration?
Yeah, so it just depends on the type of SRL. So if we get into non-leading edge, like your anchor point is at your shoulder, back D-ring area and higher. So you're not going to go too far with those systems. Whereas a leading edge, a large unit can be on the ground, it can be, on a beam over here on an anchor point, 4 feet up. And yeah, you're going to get that tension and that pull because there's especially on the larger ones, there's such a large spring and housing in there that you're kind of getting that pullback, right? Because that's what it wants to do. The second you pull it back, it wants to retract back in at the same time. But yeah, there's like technology's come so far too. So back in the day, when you think about it, a large SRL, the drum's going like this. If it's in the ceiling, it's going to move beautifully. But the second I put it on the floor, the housing's a little wonky, and so now the drum's kind of in an awkward angle facing up your back D-ring. So in the 3M world, they came out with what's called the Smart Lock, and it's got a magnetic call on it. So it actually reduces that nuisance lockup. That's what you would feel like. You're trying to walk and you get that nuisance lockup. So it reduced a lot of that nuisance lockup. So now you can do the job just as safely, if not safer, because now you're not getting that lockup that's going to happen, and you can move faster. So your productivity increases.
Okay. Yeah, that was kind of always the pain, is dragging that big block around on the rat line all the time. It's like you'd intentionally like yank it so it would lock up so you could pull it so you didn't have to walk, 20, 30 feet back and then pick it up and kind of move it down the rat line where you needed it to go.
Yeah. And then that's something that you can't do, because then once you pull it, kind of lock it, it's locked. It's meant to have that free retraction that goes on.
Yeah. So don't do that.
Day. But yeah, don't do that. But the technology, like fall protection, really still is very young when you look at it. I think it was like the mid 90s in Canada when the requirement was that people had to wear full body harnesses and get out of body belts. So when we look at that difference, it's like that's mid 90s. We're 2023 at the moment. So there's not that many decades in between. That the time is, as time goes on and time progresses, we keep seeing new inventions, new product coming out that will help reduce those pains, I guess, and barriers that prevent people from wearing fall protection at the end of the day.
Gotcha. Now, we were talking earlier about not tying off by your feet if you've got one of the 6 foot lanyards. Where should you tie off? Obviously overhead, but I mean, is there like a height requirement? Does it have to be mid back or above, or does it have to be above the head? Because that was always my question. I was like, well, we have to tie off at 6 feet. And I've got a 6 foot lanyard. So if I tie off here, by my feet on whether it's a Molly Hogan or a Beamer or whatever, we'd tie off to that. If I fall off this structure, whatever I'm up on top of, I got 6 foot of lanyard, and then I probably got about 4 foot of, body and legs between my D-ring and my feet. So I'm going to fall off and I'm going to break my feet. And then this thing's just going to keep me suspended until, somebody can come get me down. So like, where do I need to tie off at?
Yeah, so regular, the majority of the lanyards that are out there, you'll see right on the label that it cannot be exposed to a greater than, you might say, 5.9 feet or 6 feet of free fall. So that means that your anchor point and your lanyard are kind of in line with your back D-ring, and that's the lowest point because that's a 6 foot free fall. So by the time that your feet leave that platform, that's your 6 foot free fall until everything starts to come in, become taut, and then the energy absorber starts to deploy. Lanyards have a greater fall clearance requirement than SRL. So there's pros and cons to both. Yes, SRLs cost a little bit more. Just like when flat screen TVs first came out, how expensive they were versus tube TVs.
Mm-hmm.
They cost a little bit more. They weigh a little bit more, but they can drastically reduce your fall clearance requirements versus a lanyard because it's always slack in that system.
I got you. Yeah, that was always a question that baffled me. I was like, why do we tie off right here? And because that's the only place we had to tie off. And I was like, I'm just going to fall and break my ankles.
Yeah. And that's where we would come into play and say, why aren't we using a horizontal lifeline where we can raise now the anchor point up to the back C-ring level, if not higher, depending on what it is, if not higher, and reduce that fall clearance. So now they're not going to have that free fall that goes along with the lanyard or we're reducing that free fall, which then means that we're reducing the fall clearance requirement, the dynamic forces on your body, and all those numbers start to subtract at the end of the day. But it's the setup, it's the cost, all those little things, right? Fall protection is, there's not a perfect world, especially within the world of construction, because of gravity and because of technology is, the decking below is 10 feet below. The purpose of fall protection is going to keep you in an upright position. So we don't want you going down and then hitting your head. That's where the brain injuries and trauma and fatalities can lead to. So a lot of it revolves to that SRL engages. Yes, you've gone over, maybe you bottomed out a little bit, but you're in an upright position.
Okay. And then without that soft stop in there, correct me if I'm wrong, it's about so like if I was to fall and do a 6 foot drop and that, without a soft stop, isn't that like a 10,000 pound force?
So on the back of our demo trucks, we used to take a restraint lanyard, so no energy absorber, and drop it 2 feet on a 220 pound weight. And we would generate anywhere between 2,900 to like 3,600 pounds of force. Just the dynamic. So everything in fall protection has a breaking strength rating of 5,000 pounds.
Okay.
So that's, there's different minimum and maximum worker weight, but everything has a breaking strength of 5,000 pounds. But yeah, generating 2,900 to 3,600 pounds of force on a 220 pound weight, like just the violence that it would shake and rock the entire demo truck and do all these things. So internally, like the internal components of your body to take that dynamic force, like turning your body into jello on the inside, right?
Yeah.
Like
it's just kinetic
like
energy.
Being hit by a Mac. Yeah. Yeah. So your body just cannot handle it. It's survivable, sure. But now if you're hanging there and you don't have a rescue plan, now that person is bleeding internally. We have all these other issues that go along with it. So it's like, we get the anchor points, we get the body support, we get the connecting link, that's your ABCs. And then the part that everybody forgets is C for descent and rescue. That person can't hang there all day.
I was going to ask you, what's the like maximum time that you have from the time that somebody falls until you have to recover them and get them back up to where they're not losing extremities because of blood flow?
Yeah, 10, 15 minutes max.
Okay.
10, 15 minutes. Like immediately a rescue plan should be implemented. A lot of harnesses now come with built-in suspension trauma straps, which help alleviate some of that suspension trauma that comes from hanging in a harness. So if the worker's conscious, they can relieve their suspension trauma straps, kind of stand in it, take a lot of that force off of the back of their legs. It also keeps them calmer because they're standing on something. Mm-hmm. But that 10, 15 minutes, you better have a rescue plan. And there's so many cool technologies out there for rescue. So like the R550 roll glide system, it's a 40-to-1 rescue system. So when I would raise a 220 pound weight with very little ease off of the back of the truck, I'm like, look, guys, if I can do it, not trying to pull out the girl card here, but there's 100 guys watching me do this. If I can do this, and I can rescue the biggest guy on site, anybody can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so to make it easy, right, and not complicated again, the standby rescue, your job is to be in the construction world, whether it's an iron worker or carpenter or whatever, but knowing that there's a rescue piece of gear ready for them if anything ever happens. And it's easy to use, had the KISS method, simplicity, you're good to go.
Okay. Yeah, I had these, I guess they're two little, not tabs or whatever, but it's kind of like a folded up strip or whatever. So like you could, and you could use it on any harness. It didn't matter which one, because it just kind of fed through itself to tie off, and I would just tuck them in my harness. So if I ever was the victim of a fall, you could actually just kind of yank on these things, I guess like you'd yank on a parachute cord, and they drop out. You could actually lower them down to your feet and step in them kind of like stirrups and stand up on it. So it takes that pressure off your leg, because like for folks that don't know, when you fall, you know, you've got those straps that kind of run up across your thighs, or your leg straps. That cuts off the blood circulation to your femoral artery. So that's when it starts causing issues. If you stay there longer than 10, 15 minutes, you could end up having, if you survive that, you could end up having to be amputated just because the loss of blood flow. I mean, that's what they told us. But so that system allows you to, so that system allows you to put your feet in there and kind of just, you stand up, and now you're hanging out. You've taken that weight off of the belts that are wrapped around your femoral arteries. So that kind of gives you more prolonged time for somebody to perform a rescue.
Absolutely. And the thing is, when blood starts to cool, that means that we have less blood flow to the heart and to the brain, and oxygen flow and everything. So if a worker's hanging for too long, they go unconscious. That's where our issue is, potential stroke and heart attack too, because we just don't have that proper flow of blood happening at the end of the day. So that's why rescue has to be an immediate thing. And we can't use 911 as a rescue plan. I know here in Canada, it is not an option. I live in a very small town, and we have a volunteer fire department. They don't have a, put together rescue team. We're not downtown Toronto or, some of these major cities. So if they don't have a rescue plan and we've been waiting for 911, well, now what do we do? So yeah, you can't use them as your backup. You need to have something on hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's often overlooked. A lot of the job sites that I worked on, where you had to tie off. There was no rescue plan. The rescue plan was don't fall. And pretty much that was like the thing. And I had a guest on here a couple weeks ago, and they told him, it's funny because he's out in Mississippi and travels all around the U.S. But they told him the same thing they told me. Like you're if you fall, you're fired before you hit the ground. And that was the mentality that I had growing up with on the job site. Like I said, I didn't receive any training until I went to an apprenticeship program. And that's where I learned about all this stuff. And I was like, man, I've been doing this stuff wrong for a long time. And this is information that I would pass off to the new guys that are coming onto the job site. Like, here's how you do it, because I was shown the wrong way. So you just keep passing off this bad information to the next generation. And that's probably why falls are still the number one cause of death, because there's just not enough training out there. And then you got a lot of companies that want to pinch pennies when it comes to safety, because safety stuff's required, but it's also expensive. And I think it's expensive because it's required in some aspects. A lot of people are like, well, this is life-saving equipment here, and it's required, so we're gonna mark up the price on this a little bit. Not always the case, but I mean, I think, some people take advantage of that. So companies, they want to pay the least amount possible to still be in compliant. But then again, now that you're using that, now we need to have a rescue plan. That's where the training and stuff comes in. The folks that are on the job site need to know how to recover somebody that's been a victim of a fall. And
we still hear it too, that you're saying about, you're fired before you hit the ground sort of thing. We still hear it. It's nothing new.
It's worldwide.
The mentality still exists. Yeah, it still exists. We get a lot of the older gentlemen on the sites who are like, well, back in my day, I didn't have to do this. And, look at me, I'm still here. And I'll flat out ask them, how many people did you see actually die on the job? Like, oh, a dozen. I'm like, well, then you're a lucky one.
Yeah.
And my goal is that these new guys coming in is that they never experience a fatality on the job site. So you've seen a dozen. You were one of the lucky ones. Those other 12 guys weren't. And those numbers were huge. Mm-hmm. So lose the mentality, because you're just kind of not helping these younger group who are the new and young workers, where we know our fall fatalities, not just fall fatalities, but workplace fatalities, regardless of it, are taking place with the new and young workers, because either they're not trained properly, it's rushed through, they don't understand the job at hand, or there might be a language barrier, et cetera. So I shut down those guys who are like, back, I've been doing this for 50 years. Congratulations, you're alive.
Yeah.
You're lucky. But you know what? There weren't seatbelts in cars either at one point. There were all these, the world has evolved when it comes to safety. Everybody touches safety on a daily basis. Doesn't matter who you are and what you work in, what environment you work in, there's safety somewhere. So it's evolved, and we have to change that culture and the mentality from it. I know it's not there to make your job easier. It's there to make your job safer.
Yeah.
You're going to get home at the end of the day.
And I think that's why I'm such a proponent for safety when it comes to especially welding and ironwork. I mean, those are the two industries that I worked in, but I've seen what can happen. Luckily I've been doing it for over 26 years. I've not had an accident where, I've cut myself up with a grinder, or that I've fallen, or, tipped over. Well, no, I have tipped over equipment. We're not going to talk about that. But I've seen people cut themselves open with a grinder. I've seen cutoff wheels explode. Luckily, it wasn't me. But you know what? Now that I see that it can happen, and it does happen to people that are older and more experienced than I am, they've been doing it longer than I have. Well, guess what? I'm going to put my face shield on. I've had 2 near misses when it comes to taking a fall. One was from about 20 feet. The other one was from probably about 25 to 70 feet, or not 25 to 27 feet. And the first time I was not wearing a harness. The second time I was wearing a harness, but again, I wasn't tied off to anything. And luckily I had a coworker right next to me that seen what I was getting ready to do, because I was so focused on the work. I went to go step on a piece of insulation that I thought had a purlin underneath it. Well, guess what? The purlin wasn't there. It was probably 2 foot behind me. And as soon as my foot started to move that way, he reached out and grabbed me as I was falling through. So I'm a firm believer in fall protection, because that stuff works. If they didn't have a coworker right next to them paying attention to what I was doing, I probably wouldn't be here right now, or I wouldn't be in the condition that I'm in right now. So I'm a firm believer in fall protection, because this stuff actually works. I started telling my boss man, I was like, hey, we need fall protection, because I almost had a fall, and I'm super safe, but it doesn't matter. It can happen to anybody. Safety is non-discriminatory. It doesn't care, your race, your religion, your gender. It doesn't care about any of that stuff. You get out on the job site, and gravity is the great equalizer. You can't just tip over and lean. I mean, unless you're Superman, but I don't think anybody is.
Well, and that's just it, right? It's non-discriminatory. It's going to happen. It's just, it may not have happened to you. It's not about the fact it hasn't. It's the fact of potentially when. So that if it does happen to you, you have all the right gear. You have your face shield on. You have your, welding gloves or your cut-resistant gloves, whatever it is that you've been given for that job. Got it on. That's a protective barrier. That's going to be between the difference of, you walking away at the end of the day, how you walk into the job site, or you walking out, unfortunately, in a body bag or an ambulance, because it's happening. It happens every single day when we talk about falls at height.
Yep.
And you look at the people who want to be penny pinchers, and then you look at what the OSHA fines are. How much money did you save? How much is a person's life worth? That's always a question that I'd ask the purchaser every once in a while, is how, or even the safety person, because we'd have people who are like, until administrative labor tells us we can't do this, we're just going to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I got to walk away. I'm off this site. There's no point in arguing with you, because I'm never going to win, because it's not going to be the right way.
Right.
So it's just how much is your life worth? And I turn around and people are like, our company isn't buying us this. I'm like, go down the street and invest in yourself. You paid $1,000 for a brand new iPhone. That's doing what? You can check your, Tinder, or you can check your, whatever it is that you're checking. But this harness is a life-saving piece of gear.
Yeah. And you can pick up a high quality 5-point tower harness for $250.
Yeah, not it's
and it
not
might be less nowadays. But I mean, it's a good piece of equipment. I mean, I've spent more than that on work boots, like you were saying originally. Like, how much do you spend on a pair of work boots? Well, in my younger days, I'd go to Walmart for like $20. I get a good pair of, I think like Wolverines or something like that. But once I could afford better equipment, like I buy better boots. So, like $250, $300 for a pair of work boots, that's not bad. $250, $300 for a harness, that's not bad. Especially you get one that's comfortable and it fits correctly, and it's kind of ergonomic. It doesn't weigh a whole lot, but you can transfer
easy to adjust.
your gear. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and that's invest in yourself.
That's it. That's what I tell people all the time. Invest in yourself. Just do it. Somebody's not going to do it for you. You can't sit around and be like, I got hurt because somebody didn't invest in me. Take control of the situation when it comes to your own safety and invest in yourself.
Yeah. And it shouldn't be on the worker, but a lot of times it is. And most workers don't know any better. And that's the big thing is these companies are supposed to provide all this equipment. And if your employer is not providing you the appropriate safety equipment, you need to find another job or you need to protect yourself. Yeah. And it just comes down to that. Be like, well, I'm supposed to have a harness. I know that would make my life safer. It'd probably make my work site conditions a little bit better, but my company's they're not going to provide it. Go find an employer that will. Or invest in yourself. If you really love that job, you love the people you're working with, or they get you the compliance in a bucket type harness, like go invest in yourself a little bit. Like that's exactly what I did. I mean, my employer provided me one every day. It wasn't the one I wanted to wear. It was kind of like when I was growing up in high school and I wanted a brand new pair of Vans or Airwalks, and my mom's like, "No, we're going to Payless because it's a buy one get one free, and your little brother needs a pair too." And I'm like, "I don't want to wear those shoes." Well, go get a job and you can buy your own. That's exactly what I did. So it's the same thing when it comes to safety equipment. I don't like the stuff you're providing me. Well, we're meeting compliance, so that's what you got. Take it or leave it. Go buy yourself some good safety equipment.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've even worked with employers where we've implemented a program where $25 every other paycheck or every paycheck came off the harness. So it was like, hey, in the past we'd buy you a $100 harness. Now we're going to buy you a $175 harness. But the onus of the extra $75 is on the employees. And they sign a contract, they sign an agreement. So 3 paychecks, $25. They don't even miss it, on their paycheck, and it's done. And now we've got something that's a little bit better. But now there's an ownership. Hey, you paid for this too. And that when you go to trade it in, we're not going to charge you for another one, but show us that it's due and because you wore it. And that's the whole purpose, right? It's like glove exchange programs. Where they're like, show us the worn out gloves and we'll give you a new pair. We're not questioning. So it's just about being creative sometimes in different ways of going about it, that you can implement a program that doesn't have to be bank breaking or shattering. This is a capital expenditure now that,
right.
Somebody's come on the site and said, we've got all the wrong fall protection gear. You can do it smartly. Just knowing what's available is there and talking to the right people.
Now, what about storage? Like so I got my harness. It fits. I got a good one. It's not top of the line, but it's not the compliance in a bucket harness either. But where do I want to store this? I want to keep it like dry, or is it okay to get wet all the time and just kind of leave it in a wad at the bottom of the gang box next to all my cutting fluids, or like where should I keep this stuff? And what are some of the elements that I want to keep off of my harness?
Yeah, so you definitely want to keep it. You want to keep it in a dry, even temperature, room temperature, storage conditions as much as possible. If it's getting soaking wet, then, ensuring that it's drying completely. So you have the ability to hang it somewhere, bring it home and hang it in your garage, whether you're taking care of it or on the job site, just want to ensure that certain things aren't getting on it. So certain chemicals that can come in contact, paint, things that can start to break down the actual webbing. We need to make sure that stuff isn't penetrating into the web, because over time it will start to just degrade it somehow, depending on what it's coming in contact with, right? Don't dip it in some Verathane or, paint thinner because you got paint on it sort of situation. But then you get into like really nasty environments or places where folks are spraying like spray foam or they're painting all the time. There's actually harnesses that have like a polyurethane coating goes over top of the webbing to protect them, because they know that that's a daily occurrence that they're coming in contact with. Again, it goes back to the right product for the right application and the job.
Okay.
So yeah, you definitely want to keep it clean. So giving it a wash, dish soap, just the stuff, if it's good enough for the oily ducts, then it's totally fine for your harness. Some warm water and some dish soap and give it a clean wipe off with a clean damp cloth. That's really the basics. Nothing, no Lysol wipes during COVID. That was a big thing. Like people started using Lysol wipes all over their harnesses. We're like, don't do it.
Bad idea.
Because we haven't tested it. Right. So just that a damp soapy rag and clean it off and just take care of it. Right. If you get something that's on there, clean it off as soon as you have the chance to do it.
So Dawn dish soap, safe for ducks, safe for harnesses.
Exactly.
Okay, good. It's good to know. Now, because you deal with folks every day on a day-to-day basis when it comes to fall protection, harness fit up, all that good stuff. You go out and do product demos. What's some of the biggest common issues that you see when it comes to fall protection or misnomers or misconceptions about fall protection?
That just because you have a harness and a lanyard, you're safe.
Okay.
That's probably the biggest one. And then explaining to them why and what does the label say and what does that free fall mean and what does it actually mean in real life when we take it and we show it off. A lot of it is just the feeling of I'm safe. I got a harness and a lanyard, even though I'm walking a structural I-beam or I'm working over hollow core precast concrete where, again, it's a sharp edge. It's just that understanding of how the entire system works that I find that it doesn't happen within training. And sometimes, we all know what everybody's retention is within a training program. So a lot of it is going out on the site. Now you've got the fall protection. Now let's roll it out based on the actual products you have here and talk about the limitations, because there are limitations to all the gear, whether it's a weight, min and max. Whether it's a limitation of what you can and cannot do with an SRL and what's going to keep it working totally fine and what's going to destroy it in 2 hours if you keep going the route that you're going. So a lot of it is that smaller digestible chunks of understanding the ins and outs of the differences, lanyards, SRLs, leading edge, non-leading edge, and what can happen. Nobody ever taught me this. This is fantastic.
Yeah. And do you know of any resources where people can go and kind of learn more about fall protection? Like, is there like a YouTube channel of anybody that provides this type of training that's like factual that, people can actually put their faith and trust in and kind of put some of that stuff to work?
Yeah. And manufacturers are usually the number one go-to, right?
Okay.
So 3M has a safety page and there's all different videos on the safety page that talk about leading edge. And there's actually demonstrations where they drop weights of non-leading edge products. So your regular web lanyard, a regular cable SRL, and then a leading edge cable SRL so that people can see like, holy crap, that just blew up. It totally failed. So there's a variety of different ABCs of fall protection within that. That's always the best way. And then if people want to learn more, I always say like reach out to the manufacturer's reps, because those reps are they're the experts within that field, and that whether it's that state, that province that you're living in, they know what needs to be done based on the application, the job, and the regulations, and that's the best way to go about it.
Okay, well, perfect, Andrea. It's been awesome. It's been a pleasure having you out on the podcast. Thank you so much for your time coming out here to educate the listeners on all things fall protection. I really appreciate it. It was definitely worth the wait to be able to get you on the show. So. Thank you once again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it too. I got to talk about my passion, fall protection. So stay safe out there, folks. Tie off. It'll save your life.
Awesome. Thank you once again. All right, everyone. That about does it for this week's episode of the ARC Junkies podcast. Thank you all for the download and continued support of the show and my work. I genuinely appreciate it. I hope you all have an awesome holiday regardless of what you're celebrating. My family and I are going to be celebrating Christmas, so I'll say Merry Christmas. But if you're celebrating Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, or any other holiday, I wish you all the best. I hope you all get some time off from work and get to spend some quality time with your family and friends. I appreciate each and every one of you. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there, and until next time, make every well better than your last.